The market was loud, filled with the smell of strange fruits, roasted meat, and smoke from alien spices. Merchants shouted in different languages, pulling buyers toward their stalls. A human man walked carefully through the crowd, his head turning left and right. He was used to the stares by now. On this planet, humans were rare, often looked at as weak or useless. Still, he ignored the whispers and kept walking. His boots crunched against the dusty ground as he searched for something simple. Just food and some rest after his long journey. In the middle of the road, his eyes caught a small figure sitting against a broken wall. It was a girl, alien by her shape and her bright silver eyes. Her clothes were dirty, torn at the edges, and her knees were pressed tightly against her chest as if to hide herself. Her thin arms trembled. She held out one hand, weakly reaching for the people passing by. "Food," she whispered, her voice dry and small. But no one stopped. Some glanced at her with disgust, others with pity they never acted upon. A group of young alien men laughed openly at her, throwing the peel of a fruit near her feet. She lowered her eyes, her face red from shame. The human paused. Something in him twisted. He had seen beggars before, even on Earth, but there was something different about her. She was not just hungry. She looked invisible to everyone around her, as if her life had no value. He stepped closer, reaching into his small pack. He pulled out a piece of bread he had saved from earlier. It was rough and dry, not much for himself, but enough for her. He knelt down and held it out. Her head rose slowly, her eyes wide as if she couldn't believe it. The silver glow in her gaze caught the dim light of the market lamps. For a second, she just stared at him. Her lips parted. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached for the bread. She bit into it carefully, as if it might vanish from her hands. The taste must have been nothing special, but her face showed pure relief. The young men who had laughed at her stopped and turned. One of them smirked. "Look, the human gives away his food," he mocked. "How noble." Others laughed with him, but the human ignored them. He kept his eyes on the girl, who chewed slowly, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. She swallowed hard, then whispered words that froze him. "You are kind. My mother is perfect for you." The human blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Around them, the laughter stopped. The crowd that had once ignored her now looked with wide eyes. A murmur spread quickly, people whispering, heads turning, even some merchants falling silent. He frowned, confused by the sudden change. What had she just said that made everyone react? The girl leaned closer, her small voice clear this time. "You want a wife, don't you?" "My mother? She is perfect for you." The man stiffened. He hadn't spoken a single word to her, hadn't mentioned wanting a wife. How could she know something so strange? His eyes scanned the crowd. The whispers grew louder. Some aliens looked shocked, others looked amused. A few even seemed afraid. The human felt heat in his chest. Why was this little girl's sentence so important? The girl finished the last bite of bread, her hands still shaking. She smiled faintly, though her face was pale and weak. Then she whispered again, softer, but with certainty. "You will protect us." He didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind raced with questions he had no way to ask in that moment. The girl's body was small, fragile, yet her words carried weight like iron. The human stood slowly, and the crowd stepped back as if giving space to something dangerous. The alien men who mocked her earlier stayed silent now, their eyes uneasy. The girl's silver eyes never left him. Even as he turned to go, he felt her stare digging into his back. The words replayed in his mind again and again. "My mother is perfect for you." He tried to shake the thought away, but the market felt heavier, as if the air itself had changed. People no longer stared at him as a weak stranger. They looked at him like a man standing on the edge of something far larger than himself. He tightened the strap of his pack and walked faster, wanting to escape the weight of their stares. Behind him, the girl shifted against the broken wall, her lips still moving as if repeating a prayer. Some passersby stopped to whisper to one another, pointing at her and then at him. The sound of the market carried on. Shouts of sellers, clinks of coins, but beneath it all ran the quiet current of her words. They followed him, clinging to his thoughts like shadows he couldn't shake. As he turned the corner of the street, he dared to look back. The girl was still there, hugging her knees, but her face was different now. She was no longer just a starving child. She looked like someone who had passed a message, a secret too heavy for her small frame. The human walked on, his steps heavy, the bread he gave away feeling far more valuable than gold. He didn't understand yet, but something had shifted in that moment. His kindness had pulled him into something unseen, something waiting just beyond the light of the market stalls. And somewhere deep inside, though he didn't want to admit it, her words made his heart beat faster with a strange, unexplainable fear. The night was colder than he expected. The market noise was gone, replaced by the sound of wind moving through narrow streets. The human kept close to the shadows as he walked, careful not to draw attention. He wanted to return to the small inn where he was staying, but something made him uneasy, as if eyes followed him in the dark. He stopped once, listening. Behind him, footsteps scratched against the stone, light but steady. He turned quickly, but no one was there. The street was empty, only the broken lamps glowing faintly. He frowned and continued, his hand brushing the strap of his pack, ready to grab the small knife hidden inside. Then he heard it again, soft, hurried steps, then silence. He spun around once more. This time he saw her, the same alien girl from the market. She was standing halfway in the shadows, holding a torn piece of cloth in her hands. Her silver eyes glowed even brighter in the darkness. "What are you doing here?" he whispered sharply. But the girl only pressed the cloth to her chest and pointed down another street. She didn't speak, but her meaning was clear. She wanted him to follow. He hesitated. This could be a trap. He was in an alien city where humans had no real allies. Yet something in the girl's eyes made him pause. They were not filled with trickery or hate. They were desperate, filled with an urgency that made his chest tighten. Against his better judgment, he followed. The girl moved quickly through side alleys where the lamps were broken, places where thieves and worse usually waited. She looked too small and weak to move so boldly, but she never slowed, never looked afraid. The human stayed close, his ears alert, his knife ready in his hand now. Every step deeper into the maze of broken walls and leaning houses made him wonder if this was a mistake. Finally, she stopped in front of a ruined building. Its door cracked and its windows shattered. The roof leaned dangerously, and weeds grew through the stone. The human looked at it and felt a chill. The girl slipped inside without a sound, turning only once to wave him in. He swallowed hard and stepped after her. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. The place was silent except for the faint crackle of a small fire burning in one corner. Shapes moved in the shadows. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw her. A tall figure stood waiting near the fire, her face hidden under a dark veil. The girl hurried to her side, holding her mother's hand tightly. The woman did not move at first. She only stared at him through the thin cloth that covered her face. He could not see her full features, only the outline of a proud, sharp shape. Her presence filled the room, even though her clothes were old and her home was broken. She carried herself with the kind of strength that didn't belong in a place like this. The girl's voice broke the silence. "Mother, this is the man who gave me food." The words echoed in the ruined house. The woman tilted her head slightly. Her eyes, shadowed but bright, locked onto his. He shifted uncomfortably, feeling her gaze as if it pierced his skin. The human wanted to explain, to say it was nothing, just a piece of bread, but his voice refused to rise. The woman's silence was too heavy. She finally spoke, her voice low, smooth, yet filled with something broken. "Few give freely in this city. Fewer still give to us." Her words confused him. He glanced at the girl, but she only looked back at her mother with hope. He felt caught, as if walking into a web he couldn't see. He tried to speak, forcing his throat to work. It was nothing. Just bread. The woman stepped closer, the firelight touching her face now. She was striking, even with the tired lines around her eyes. There was sadness carved deep into her features, but beneath it, a strength like steel. She studied him with the same sharpness she might use to study an enemy. Then she lowered herself to sit by the fire, pulling her daughter onto her lap. "You are human," she said softly. "That alone should make you cautious. Yet you gave what little you had." Her tone was not angry, not even thankful. It was questioning, as if trying to understand him. The girl looked between them, her small face filled with excitement. "He is the one, Mother. He will protect us." The human stiffened, again with those strange words. "Protect them? From what? Why him?" He shook his head quickly. "You've made a mistake. I'm no protector. I'm just passing through." The girl clung to her mother's hand and shook her head fiercely. No, you are the one. I felt it when you gave me food. The woman stayed silent, but her eyes never left his. He felt trapped under her stare, as if she could see more than he wanted her to. She finally said, "Perhaps fate has a sense of humor." Her words sent another shiver through him. He wanted to leave, to walk out of this ruined house and forget he ever saw them. But his feet didn't move. Something held him there, a weight heavier than any chain. The fire popped softly, sparks rising into the air. The girl leaned against her mother, whispering again, "He is the one." The woman's hand stroked her daughter's hair, but her eyes stayed fixed on the human. In that gaze was not hope, not desperation alone, but a quiet decision being made, one that involved him whether he liked it or not. The human's heart beat faster, his throat dry. He finally realized he had stepped into something far greater than he understood. The ruined house felt less like shelter and more like the center of a storm waiting to break. And in that silence, the words he didn't want to hear repeated in his mind. "My mother is perfect for you." The fire burned low in the ruined house, casting orange shadows across the cracked walls. The human sat on a broken chair while the alien woman and her daughter stayed close to the small flame. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable, until the woman finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but filled with hidden pain. "Do you know who I was?" she asked softly, her eyes fixed on the fire. The human shook his head, unsure if he even wanted to know. The woman lifted her hand, pulling back the dark veil that covered her face. Her features were sharp and elegant, though tired. She was beautiful in a way that was almost regal, but her skin showed faint scars, her lips pressed tight with years of hardship. "I was once a countess," she said, bitterness creeping into her tone. "My husband was a lord of this city. People bowed when I walked. Servants carried my daughter when she was born. We had everything: power, respect, wealth." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "But power breeds cruelty. My husband was not kind. He treated me as property, and when he grew sick, he cared more for his throne than his family. He died, but his shadow remained." The human shifted uncomfortably. The daughter, still clinging to her mother, whispered, "They betrayed us." The woman nodded. "Yes, my own blood, my husband's family. They feared I would claim his seat, so they branded me a curse. They stripped my name, my home, my honor. They threw us into the streets. I became nothing. And this child? They laugh at her, spit at her, because she carries my blood." Her voice broke for a moment, and the human saw her bite down hard to keep control. The daughter hugged her tightly, as if her small arms could shield her mother from those memories. The human's chest felt tight. He had met many broken souls during his travels, but never someone who carried themselves with such dignity, even while telling of their downfall. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. The woman turned her gaze on him now. Her eyes burned in the firelight. "And then, you." Her voice softened strangely. "A human, a stranger who owed us nothing, stopped and gave food to my daughter. Do you know how rare that is? No one in this city would risk being seen with us. Yet you, of all beings, offered kindness." The human shifted again, shaking his head quickly. "It was just bread. Anyone would have done the same." The woman's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "No, not anyone. Not here." The daughter looked up at him then, her eyes bright. "I told you, mother. He will protect us. He is the one." Her voice was certain, as if she were speaking a truth written in stone. The human raised his hands quickly. No, you're wrong. I can't protect you. I don't even belong here. I'm just passing through the city. I'll leave in a few days." The girl's face fell, but only for a moment. Then she smiled again, a small, knowing smile. "You won't leave. Not without us." The woman studied him silently, her expression unreadable. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. The sound filled the silence as the human tried to make sense of what was happening. Why him? Why did this girl cling to him with such certainty? Why did her mother look at him as if he carried the answer to a question she had never dared to ask? Finally, the woman spoke again, her tone sharper now. "You must understand the risk. To be near me, to even speak to me, is to invite danger. My clan will not forgive you. They already watch us, waiting for an excuse to finish what they started." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Do you think your kindness can survive their hatred?" The human swallowed hard. He wanted to walk away, to tell her no, to say he had no part in their war. But his heart betrayed him. He remembered the girl's starving face in the market, the way she had looked at the bread as if it were life itself. He remembered the laughter of the men who mocked her and the silence of the crowd that did nothing. Something in him refused to join them, refused to turn away. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice low. "I don't know what I can do, but I couldn't just stand there and watch." The woman stared at him for a long time, then leaned back slowly. Her face softened, though sadness still lingered. Perhaps fate is cruel, or perhaps it has a strange sense of humor. The daughter pressed her head against her mother's chest, smiling faintly. "It's not fate, Mother. It's him." The human ran a hand across his face, frustration mixing with confusion. "Why me? Why do you believe I can help you? I'm no warrior, no leader. I don't even belong to your world." The woman's eyes softened in a way that startled him. Because sometimes a small act speaks louder than a lifetime of power. You gave bread, and that simple act is something my own people would not do. Her words sank into him like stone. He wanted to deny it again, to push away the weight of what they expected from him. But deep down, he knew the truth. His life had already changed the moment he handed over that bread. The fire dimmed, the room falling into deeper shadow. The woman pulled her daughter closer, her eyes still locked on the human. In that silence, unspoken words passed between them. Warning, hope, and something that felt dangerously close to trust. The human sat stiffly, his thoughts a storm. He didn't ask for this, didn't want this burden. But he couldn't shake the girl's words, or the way her mother looked at him. The choice wasn't spoken yet, but he could feel it pressing against him like a blade. The girl whispered softly, as if to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. "He will protect us." The words lingered in the air, more powerful than the crackle of the dying fire. And the human realized, with a shiver running down his spine, that this was only the beginning. The next morning, the city felt different. The human walked through the market with his hood low, hoping to avoid attention. But whispers followed him everywhere. He didn't need to hear the words clearly to know they were about him. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, and laughter echoed from corners. He caught fragments. The human with the exile, the cursed woman's choice, a dead man walking. His jaw tightened, but he kept moving. He hadn't chosen this, but somehow his name was now tied to the woman and her daughter. When he stopped at a stall to buy water, 3 large aliens stepped in front of him. Their clothes bore the mark of the clan. The leader, tall with scarred skin, leaned close, his breath smelling of bitter fruit. "You think yourself brave? Giving bread to the exile's child, sitting in her home? Stay away, human. She is filth, and she will drag you to your grave." The human said nothing, only stared back. The leader smirked, tapping his chest. "Walk away, or we will break you." Then they left, laughing loudly so everyone nearby could hear. The message was clear. He was warned. The rest of the day weighed heavy on him. He wanted to believe he could still leave, disappear from this city and its tangled grudges. But each time he thought of turning his back, he saw the girl's face, starving and hopeful. He remembered the woman's voice as she told him her story. He told himself it wasn't his fight. Still, his hands tightened into fists, as if his body already knew he was lying. That night, he sat in the small inn room, staring at the cracked ceiling. The streets outside were noisy at first, but as the hours passed, the city fell quiet. He tried to close his eyes, but rest would not come. Every sound outside made him sit up. Every gust of wind through the shutters made him think of danger creeping closer. Then came the knock. It wasn't gentle. It was hard, fast, stones clattering against his door. He froze, heart pounding. Another stone struck, and a small voice called out, urgent and shaking. "Please, they will kill her tonight." He rushed to the door and pulled it open. The girl stood there, her chest rising and falling with each breath, her silver eyes glowing with terror. Her dress was torn, her hands scraped. She grabbed his sleeve desperately. "Hurry, they are hurting her. They will finish her before morning." The human didn't think. He grabbed the only thing near him, a thick wooden stick from the corner of the room. It wasn't much, but it was something. He pushed past the girl, following as she darted through the narrow streets. The city was dark, the lamps dim, but she moved as if she knew every shadow. His heart hammered in his chest, and his grip tightened on the stick. As they turned a corner, he heard voices ahead. Cruel laughter. Angry shouts. The girl stopped suddenly, pressing herself against the wall. She pointed with a trembling hand. He looked. In the middle of the open square, the woman was on her knees. A circle of men surrounded her, shouting insults, throwing stones. One of them struck her across the face, and she fell to the ground. Still, she pulled herself up, shielding her daughter's name with silence. The girl beside him whimpered softly. "They will kill her." The human's chest burned. He could turn back. He could run and save himself. But his feet carried him forward before his mind could stop them. He stepped into the square, his shadow stretching under the dim light. The men paused, turning toward him with surprise, then laughter. "Look," one of them sneered. "The human pet comes to defend his trash." Another smirked. "This will be quick." The human tightened his grip on the stick and raised it. He had no plan, no armor, no weapon worth the name. But something inside him roared louder than his fear. He rushed forward. The first man swung at him, but the human ducked and struck hard across his arm. The man cried out, stumbling back. The others closed in, circling him like predators. He fought wildly, his arms aching, his breath ragged. Each strike was desperate, not skilled, but filled with the stubborn refusal to fall. A fist caught his jaw, making stars explode in his vision, but he did not go down. He swung again, hitting another across the head. The crowd watching gasped, murmuring. The woman, blood on her face, lifted her head and saw him. Her eyes widened with disbelief. No one had ever stood for her. Not a friend, not family, not even a stranger, until now. The fight dragged on, the human stumbling but refusing to break. His stick cracked under the blows, splinters digging into his palms. The men cursed, but one by one they faltered. His determination scared them more than his strength. They had faced warriors before, but not a human who bled and still kept rising. Finally, with a last swing, he forced them back. The square fell silent. The men glared, but none stepped forward again. They spat curses, retreating into the shadows. The onlookers whispered to one another, stunned. The human stood in the center, blood dripping from his lip, his chest heaving. The broken stick fell from his hand, clattering against the stone. He turned toward the woman. She was still on her knees, but her eyes were locked on him, shining with something more than pain. Slowly, she rose, holding her daughter close. Her voice trembled as she spoke, not just to him, but to everyone watching. "He fights for us." The words echoed in the silence, stronger than any weapon. And in that moment, the human realized his choice was already made. There was no turning back. He had stepped into their war, and he would not leave it again. The human's body ached as if every bone had been struck with a hammer. His lip was split, blood still dripping slowly onto his chin, and one eye was already swelling shut. His arms shook from the effort of holding the broken stick, yet he stood tall in the middle of the square. Around him, the last echoes of the fight faded into silence. The crowd that had gathered did not cheer, nor did they rush to help. They only watched with wide, uncertain eyes, whispering behind their hands. The attackers had retreated into the dark, muttering curses, their pride wounded as much as their bodies. They hadn't expected him to fight. They had thought the human would beg or run. Instead, he stood his ground, refusing to let them touch the woman again. Now the crowd murmured in low tones, as if unsure whether to admire or fear him. The woman, still trembling, stood slowly with her daughter in her arms. Blood streaked down her cheek, but her back was straight, her gaze steady. She walked toward the human carefully, as though not believing he was real. When she reached him, she whispered, "Why did you do this? Why risk your life for us?" Her voice cracked, not from weakness but from disbelief. No one had ever stood between her and her enemies before. She had faced years of being cursed, beaten, and spit upon, but she had endured it all alone. Now a stranger, worse, a human, had shed his own blood to protect her. The human tried to answer, but his throat was dry. He swallowed hard, forcing out the words. "Because someone had to." The daughter, clutching her mother's torn sleeve, smiled through her tears. She ran to the human and held his hand with her tiny fingers. "I told you, Mother. He will protect us." Her voice was small, but it rang in the silent square like a promise. The human glanced down at her, then back at the mother. He wanted to let go, to walk away and escape this burden. But the girl's hand tightened around his own, and he couldn't move. A sharp laugh broke the silence. An older man from the crowd stepped forward, shaking his head. "Foolish human," he spat. "Do you think this is over? You raised your hand against the clan. They will not forgive. Tonight you may stand, but tomorrow they will send 10 more. And the next day, 100. His voice rose louder, feeding the fear of the onlookers. You have tied your fate to an exile. You will die with her. The crowd murmured in agreement, stepping back as if distance could save them from what was coming. The human felt the weight of their words pressing on him. His enemies were not beaten, only delayed. He could already feel their hatred stretching into the future like a dark storm. But when he looked at the woman, he saw something different. She did not flinch. She did not shrink from him. Her eyes, sharp and wet with tears, carried both sorrow and pride. She lifted her chin and said, loud enough for the crowd to hear, "If he falls, then I fall with him." The whispers grew louder. Shocked voices, gasps, even laughter rippled through the square. The exiled countess had declared her loyalty to a human. The people had no words for it. Some turned their heads away as if seeing something forbidden. Others stared, frozen, unable to believe what they had just heard. The human's breath caught. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't agreed to carry her fate on his shoulders. Yet hearing her words, he felt something shift inside. She was no longer just a broken woman. She was someone who had chosen him, even if the whole city turned against her for it. The daughter pressed close to both of them, whispering like she was sealing a vow. "We are together now." The human staggered slightly, his legs weak, and the woman moved quickly to support him. She slipped her arm under his, steadying his weight. For a moment, they stood like that in the center of the square, two outcasts and a child, holding each other against the world. The crowd did not cheer, nor did they join. But they watched, and in their silence, a new story began to form. A story of a human who had dared to fight, and a fallen countess who had spoken words no one else would dare. The human finally allowed himself to breathe, though every breath hurt. He whispered to her, his voice rough, "This isn't over." "They'll come again." She nodded slowly. "Yes, they always come again." Then, with a strange calm, she added, "But now, you are with us." The walk back to her ruined house was slow. The girl skipped ahead, her joy lighting the broken alleys, while the woman kept her steady arm around him. She didn't speak much, but he felt the warmth of her touch against his side, stronger than any words. Each step was painful, but he no longer walked alone. When they reached the broken doorway, the girl pushed it open eagerly. The fire inside was still burning, low but alive. The woman guided him to a corner, forcing him to sit. She tore strips from her own sleeve and began cleaning his wounds with quiet care. Her hands were gentle, though her face was firm. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice steady now. "But you did, and now everything has changed." The human closed his eyes, letting her touch wash away some of the pain. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He already knew she was right. The moment he stepped into that fight, his path had twisted into theirs. The daughter curled up beside him, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dim light. She whispered again, almost like a lullaby, "He will protect us." The woman looked at her child, then at him. Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but she stopped. Instead, she placed her hand lightly over his, just for a moment, and let it rest there. Outside, the city was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that waited before a storm. The human knew the warning was true. The clan would come again. But as he sat there, bloodied and broken, with the exiled woman tending his wounds and the girl resting against him, he felt something stronger than fear. For the first time since he had entered the city, he no longer felt alone. And that thought was enough to keep his eyes open, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The room was dim, the only light coming from the tired little fire in the corner. The human sat against the wall, his body aching with every breath. His arms were covered in bruises, his hands still raw from gripping the broken stick. The woman knelt beside him with a bowl of water she had carried from the well. She tore more cloth from her already ruined dress and dipped it into the bowl. With slow, steady movements, she pressed the damp cloth against the cuts on his face. He hissed in pain, pulling back slightly, but she held him still with her other hand. Her touch was not rough, but it carried a firmness that left no room for argument. She did not look at his eyes as she worked, only at his wounds. Her daughter sat close by, her small head resting on his knee, refusing to move. The girl's silver eyes blinked slowly, heavy with exhaustion, yet she clung to him as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. Finally, the human whispered, his voice hoarse. Why? Why do you care what happens to me? I'm just a stranger. The woman stopped for a moment, squeezing the wet cloth in her hand. Then she looked at him directly. Her eyes, dark and tired, carried a storm of emotions, anger, grief, and something he could not name. Because you risked your life for us, she said quietly. No one else ever has. He tried to shake his head, but she placed her hand firmly on his shoulder. Do not say it was nothing. You bled in front of the whole city. You stood when even the strong would have turned away. That is not nothing. He closed his eyes, leaning back against the wall. I didn't think. I just couldn't watch them hurt you. Her gaze softened, and for a moment the hardness in her face broke. She touched his arm gently, tracing the edge of a bruise with her fingers. Her hand lingered longer than it should have, as if she were memorizing the shape of his strength. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, Why risk your life for us? We are nothing to your people. His throat tightened, but the answer came easily. Because you deserve better. Her eyes widened slightly. The words seemed to hit her like a blade, cutting deeper than all the insults she had endured. For years she had been told she was worthless, cursed, unwanted. To hear the opposite, and from a human of all people, made her chest ache in a way she had forgotten was possible. The girl stirred, lifting her head from his knee. Her voice was small but filled with certainty. See, Mother? He is the one. I told you. The human opened his mouth to argue, but the girl's smile silenced him. She looked at him as though his presence alone was enough to promise safety. Her trust felt heavier than any weapon. The woman brushed her daughter's hair back and kissed her forehead, but her eyes never left the human. She was torn. He could see it. Torn between fear of the danger he brought and a hope she had buried long ago. She sat back slowly, her hand slipping from his arm, but her gaze stayed fixed on him. You should leave, she said at last, though her voice lacked conviction. You should walk away before the clan strikes again. They will not stop. They will come for you harder each time. He looked at her, his jaw tight. And what about you? What about her? He pointed at the girl, who now clung to her mother's side. They'll keep coming for you too. The woman's lips trembled, but she forced them still. We are used to being hunted. But you are human. You can still run. Her words hung in the air, heavy and painful. He could leave. He could walk away and pretend none of this was his problem. But when he looked at the girl's hopeful face and the mother's tired eyes, he knew the truth. He could not. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. He leaned forward, his voice firm despite the weakness in his body. I won't leave you. The girl's face lit up, her smile wide and bright even in the shadows. She clapped her hands once, then curled against her mother with relief. The woman, however, froze. Her heart raced at his words, though her face tried to remain calm. She studied him carefully, searching his eyes for doubt, but found none. Her chest rose and fell as if she had forgotten how to breathe. She whispered, Do you know what you are saying? Do you know what it means? He nodded slowly. It means I stay. It means I fight if I have to. Her hand went to her mouth, covering it as if to hide her reaction. Her daughter looked between them, her small hand wrapping around both of theirs, forcing them together. We are family now, she said softly, her voice carrying an innocent finality that made neither of them argue. The woman's eyes filled with tears, though she did not let them fall. She squeezed his hand gently, only for a moment, then released it. Her strength returned, masking the emotion in her face, but the human had seen it. He knew her heart had shifted, even if she refused to admit it. Outside, faint voices carried through the night, distant but unsettling. The clan was restless. They had not forgotten. But inside the ruined house, there was a fragile piece. A man who should have walked away, a woman who had lost everything, and a child who refused to stop believing. The human lay back slowly, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. The girl curled against his side, already drifting to sleep. The woman stayed awake, sitting silently by the fire, watching him. Her eyes softened each time she looked at his face, her lips parting as though she wanted to speak but could not find the words. At last, in the quiet of the night, she whispered so softly, even he could barely hear, Perhaps. We are not nothing after all. He stirred slightly, half awake, but said nothing. A faint smile touched his lips, and sleep finally pulled him under. The woman leaned back, her daughter safe in her arms, the human sleeping only inches away. For the first time in years, she felt the faint warmth of hope flicker in her chest. And though she feared the storm that was coming, she knew she would not face it alone. The morning sun rose weakly over the broken rooftops, its pale light slipping through the cracks in the ruined house. The human stirred, his body stiff and sore from the fight, but the warmth of the small fire kept him from shivering. The girl was still curled against him, sleeping soundly, her hand clutching the fabric of his shirt. The woman sat quietly near the door, her eyes sharp and watchful, as if she had not slept at all. When he sat up, she did not greet him with softness, but with steady words. "They will come soon. Last night was only the beginning." The human rubbed his face, his jaw still aching, and nodded. He had known it too. The clan would never forgive what he had done in the square. He had humiliated their men in front of the city, and worse, he had done it for the woman they wanted erased. Now, his choice bound him to her and her daughter, whether he admitted it or not. The girl woke, blinking her silver eyes before smiling brightly. She reached for his hand without hesitation. "You stayed," she said, her voice soft but certain. "I told you, Mother. He won't leave us." The woman's lips tightened, but she did not deny it. Instead, she stood and moved closer, her shadow falling across them. "The clan will make their move. They won't attack in the streets again. They will do it with law. They will use tradition against you." The human frowned. "Law?" She nodded grimly. "There is an old custom. If a man fights for a woman in public and claims her safety, he can be bound to her by marriage. The clan will twist this. They will say you stood for me as a husband, not just as a stranger. And once they call for the trial, you will have to face it." The human froze, the weight of her words sinking in. Marriage? It had never crossed his mind. He had fought because it was right, not for any ancient ritual. But the woman's face was serious, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked slowly. Her eyes darkened. "Then they kill you. Refusal means dishonor, and dishonor means death. They will use the law to spill your blood in front of everyone. And if they cannot have me, they will destroy me and my daughter after you are gone." Silence filled the room. The girl squeezed his hand tighter, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "Don't leave us," she whispered. The human closed his eyes, taking a long breath. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted to be caught in someone else's war. But everything had changed the moment he gave that piece of bread. Walking away now would mean their end. And though part of him longed for escape, another part knew he could never abandon them. Later that day, the call came. Messengers from the clan marched through the streets, shouting so all could hear. They declared that the human had claimed the exile by defending her, and that tradition demanded a trial. If he passed, she would be his by law. If he failed, he would die, and she would be cast further into disgrace. The people filled the square, eager to see the spectacle. Some came to mock, others to witness history. A human standing against the clan was unheard of. Whispers rippled like waves, growing louder as he arrived, flanked by the woman and her daughter. The girl held his hand tightly, refusing to let go, her head held high despite the fear in her eyes. The woman walked beside him, her face proud though her heart trembled inside. The clan elders sat on a raised platform, their robes heavy with gold and jewels. Their leader's voice boomed across the square. "Human, you interfered in matters not your own. You defended an exile and raised your hand against our blood. By law, you must prove your claim. If you survive, she is yours. If you fall, both of you die." Gasps ran through the crowd, but the human stood firm. He looked at the woman beside him, her eyes locked on his. There was no escape. The choice had already been made. He stepped forward and said clearly, "I accept." The trial began. Warriors from the clan stepped into the ring, one after another. The human had no armor, no blade, only a wooden staff given by the judges. Yet he fought with everything he had. He ducked, blocked, and struck with raw determination, each blow fueled by the memory of the girl's starving face and the woman's broken story. The crowd roared, half cheering for his fall, half stunned by his strength. The woman's heart pounded with every strike he took, her fists clenched as she watched him stagger but never yield. The girl shouted encouragement, her voice rising above the crowd. "Don't stop! You can do it!" Finally, after what felt like hours, the last warrior fell. The human stood bleeding, his staff broken, but he did not collapse. The square went silent. Even the elders leaned forward, their faces unreadable. The leader of the clan stood and raised his hand. By law, he has passed. The exile is his. The crowd erupted with gasps, arguments, and whispers, but none could deny what had happened. The woman walked forward, her step steady, and stood beside the human in the ring. She placed her hand on his arm, her voice loud enough for all to hear. If he falls, I fall with him. If he stands, I stand with him. Today, we stand. The people stared, stunned into silence. The girl ran forward, wrapping both of them in her small arms. See? I told you he is the one. The human looked down at the woman, her face close to his, her eyes shining with tears she could no longer hide. He was exhausted, bleeding, and aching, but he felt something stronger than pain, a bond that no clan, no law could break. The trial was over, but the journey had only begun. Together, they had defied the city, and though the storm ahead was uncertain, they would face it as one. The human, the fallen countess, and her daughter stood in the center of the square, no longer broken, no longer alone. And the whispers of the crowd carried a new story across the city, one of defiance, of fate, and of a human who refused to bow.